Shalom, giving honor and praise to the Creator and the Maker of heaven and earth, the Most High Power. We're going to start off in prayer and move on from there. Malkeinu Atahu, Eloheinu, Inkimoka, Yehovah Zebaot Ata, Meleka Olam Bebakusha, Shublanu, Et Derakeka Bakayenu, Peshena, Et Kamulka Bakayenu, Teberekna, Et Hamakon Beneyadat, Watib Neha Bebakusha Yehovah, Meleka Olam Bebakusha, Tishmana Tefilot Tenu, Wata'ane Otan Bebakushaya, Wagam Kane Bebakushaya, Ta'azin Bebakusha El Takanunenu, Yehovah Eloheinu, we Elohe Abotenu, Elohe Abraham, Elohe Yiskak, we Elohe Yisrael, Ha'el, Asher Mar'ah, Bama Aseaka, Atahu, Ein Kimoka, Ein Eslaka, Ein Yoshe Mil Badeka, Ki Ataha El Elyon, Wako Debarim Taktaka, Yehovah Zebaot, Ataha El Haro Ehako, Wagam Ken Ha'el Asher Lo Yerae, Ata Ose Hako, Wagam Ken Ata Lo Neeseta, Yehovah Zebaot, Meleka Olam, Ata El Hamamashi, Wa Ein El Zor, Ein El Shakwir Ata, Yehovah Zebaot, Anatnu Mit Padim Lefaneka, Lish Loak Otanu, Lish Olka, Lihiyot Itanu, Leharpa, Ekko Oebenu, Mekwar Benu, Yehovah Zebaot, Bebakwasha, Tir Raketsna, Et Ko Ha Meluk Le King Be Yisrael, Wagam Ken Ko Gelulenu, Wagam Ken Ko Pishaenu, Wagam Ken Ko Katotenu, Wagam Ken Ko to Ebotenu, what to Ebot Abotenu, Yehovah Elohe Yisrael, Talwe Bebakwasha, Et Shebet le Yisrael, le Shebet le Yisrael, le Mate, Reuben El Mate Ben Yamin, Yehovah Zebaot, Melech HaOlam, Atahe Petsta Et Bene Yisrael, le Ko, le Pa'ate Ha'aret, Yehovah Zebaot, Eloheinu, we Elohe Abotenu, Ha'el Haroe, Ha'el Hayotzer, Ha'el Habore, Ha'el Hashaddai, Ha'el Hashalit, Ha'el Hagorem, wo Gomer, Atahu we Ein Kimoka, Meleka Olam, Tip Shek Babakusha, Et Emet Shalkali Yo, Limlok Al Amka Yisrael, with Titain Babakusha, Et Refua Tamima, Loko Ak Kola Kole Amka Yisrael, Yehovah Zebaot, Tiberekna Etamachane Hazo, Bashem Shema Yisrael, with Tiyana Bebakusha, Im Nasizi Port Wagam Kane, but now, Wagam Kane Benotal, Wagam Kane Bebakushaya, Anatnu Shoalim Oka, La Tate Refua Tamima, El Sordanaftali, Wabakusha Yehovah Elohe Yisrael, Tis Kor Bebakusha, Et Zikron Morai, More Yosef, Wagam Et Adon Yishai, Wagam Et Sor Shimon Ben Yehuda, Meleka Olam Bebakusha, Al Tip She Et Maaseyim Bazik de Kwabe Eneka, Meleka Olam Bebakusha, Tibarek Watikazek Watatzliak Bebakusha, Et Maasey Mori Kohe Mikael Mori Ba Ibrit, Yehovah Eloheinu, we Elohe Abotenu, Elohe Abraham, Elohe Yiskak, we Elohe Yisrael. Babakusha, Ta'irna et Bene Yisrael, Le Da'atka, Le Da'at et Benatka, Le Da'at et Kamatseka, Le Da'at et Toroteka, Et Kukweka, Mishmarateka, Wako Debari, Masha Atanish Bata, with Dibarata El Moshe, where El Zikariyahu, Ben Ido, where God et the Kezko Ben Buzi, Memak Telewi, Yehovah Eloheinu, where Elohe Abotenu, Al Kaasha Ani, Kore Lefaneka, Shamana Letefilot Tenu. Hallelujah! Hallelujah! Amen. Brothers and sisters, giving honor and praise to the Creator and the Maker of heaven and earth. There's only one God in Israel, brothers and sisters. There is no two gods. Israel is not polytheistic. You understand? So some people who may have a weird concept, ideology, or teaching that sits there and says, well, when you get into a deeper understanding and the word Elohim, you know it's plural. So therefore there's more than one. No, there is no more than one. Just like there's Mayim, that means water. Just like there's the word Panim, that means face. Well, Elohim means God. So we want that to be noted because in Hebrew, which we're going to go over, brothers and sisters, you have to have it to where the verb and the noun all agree with one another. That's how you can tell what's what in Hebrew. All right, the Hebrew aspect. Why is this important? This is a teaching being brought to you from Shema Yisrael, giving due respect to the creator, the maker of heaven and earth. On the human level, want to give due respect to Nasi Zipporah as well as Nasi Natan El, his son, and our beloved Chief Natan El of the tribe of Lewi. Brothers and sisters, in the prayer, I mentioned some of my other teachers. That is to say, Chief Simeon, may he rest in peace. And he was a teacher, once it came very, very pertinent inside of the history. Then there's my teacher, Kohen Mikael, that I always talk about. And he was a teacher to me in regards to the Hebrew. So we want that to be noted for edification purposes. Now, when we give respect on a human level to elders, to chief men, and even as you may hear in Shema to our mothers, dignitaries, and so forth and so on, we're not, brothers and sisters, praising them in place of the Most High. We don't pray in the name of any prince or any chief man or any elder or any youth. So this is something we want to point out for edification purposes. All right, the Hebrew aspect. Why is it important? Why is this important? Well, since we're speaking of the Hebrews, it is important to get into the Hebrew. What would the Hebrews mean and think when they say Mitzrayim? Why would the Hebrews identify what is known as Egypt as the house of bondage? Just some questions. Next slide, please. What you're looking at here, brothers and sisters, on the left-hand side is coming from a book called Black Cargoes, a picture that was painted in regards to the Atlantic slave trade of the people that was taken and captive in the ship. What you're looking at on the right-hand side is the aspect in which the people were taken. We want to emphasize on this for several reasons. If you look very carefully, as we went over before, entitled Old Testament Hebrews on History or Hebrew Israelites on History, which is also on this channel, okay, you will notice that British North America got the lowest proportion of the captives. South America, namely Brazil, got the most. Then the West Indies as a whole got more than both Brazil and what was called as North America. So this is something we want to point out for edification purposes. It's generally stated that during the course of what is referred to as the Atlantic slave trade, you had it, brothers and sisters, to where the people who were taken out, all right, out of 100, 30 of them went to Brazil. Out of 100, 6 went to what we call North America. The majority went to the West Indies and to South America. The minority went to North America. When you find people saying basically that we are the people of Turtle Island, when you find people saying that we are indigenous to this land, they're not considering Brazil. They're not considering Guyana. They're not considering Barbados. They're not considering Jamaica. They're not considering Honduras. They're not considering Cuba. When they start to speak on, we are indigenous to this land and we should go to court and we should have our rights because our social security number is a trademark for money. Brothers and sisters, that is one of the sorriest teachings to present to people of color. So we want to point out, no offense intended to anybody, once it comes down to this. Our ancestors were scattered throughout the length and breadth of the Western Hemisphere and other parts of the world. We are not teaching that Israelites are only over here in the Western Hemisphere. We are teaching that since we are in the Western Hemisphere, that seems to be what we talk about the most because that is the portion that identifies us the most because that's what we relate to. So this is something we want to point out for edification purposes. Now, next slide, please. Thank you. There are some who say verse 48 to verse 68 is about the Israelites and the Romans only. As we pointed out in the other slide or in the other presentation, you'll begin to sit there and see that in verse 45, it says that you shall be smitten before your enemies. You shall go out one way against them and flee before them. In verse 25. Then it goes on to say that all these curses shall pursue thee and overtake thee. So let's see how that happened in regard. Because if such is the case, that means you can't identify that as the Israelites and the Romans only, because it says shall pursue and overtake thee. So it's not as if 70 AD came around and everything just ended. No, you still had the matter of the Kittos battle. You still had the matter of Masada. You still had the matter of what happened with Hadrian and so forth. And then you had the situation that happened with Yathrib. Then you had the situation of what happened with the Israelites in Western Africa that fought against the Arabs. Then you had the situation of what happened with our ancestors with the Maroons fighting against the British and so forth and so on. So these are things we want to point out for edification purposes. You cannot sit there and just try to pinpoint it with the Romans unless you're going under the Christianity concept that Israel ended in 70 AD. The doctrine of Jesus Christ came in and everything is now just a whole new world order in that particular regard. So this is something we want to point out for reason and purposes. Next slide, please. Deuteronomy 28 and Daniel chapter 9. We went over this in the last part, but I'm doing this in this particular regard so we can begin to see how these kind of things work. So the point in this is for you to pause it, read it for yourself, so that way it won't make it seem as if we're teaching as a beating in the head kind of thing, like this is what it is and you must understand it this way. No, I wanted to sit there and take the time and rehash this particular aspect so you can take the time, pause it, read it, digest it, and see what the Most High can show you about that. Next slide, please. All right. Deuteronomy 28 and others. Next slide, please. Deuteronomy 28 and others. Next slide, please. Deuteronomy chapter 5 and Deuteronomy chapter 4. Next slide, please. Hebrew Lexicon, page 651. Next slide, please. Hebrew Dictionary, page 261. Next slide, please. Jeremiah and the matter, as we went over before. History to be noted. Babylon came to power at that time. Persia came to power at the time it did. Alexander with Greece came to power at the time in which it did. And Rome came to power in that time in which it did. So these are things we just want to show in this very short video about what we're talking about. There will be a part 3 that goes in much more in depth, and there will be a part 4 that will go much more in depth than that. The point in this particular video, brothers and sisters, which is the matter of Deuteronomy 28, verse 68, the extended version, part 2, is to begin to sit there and show so you can pause it, digest it, and that's why I went from slide to slide, so that way you begin to sit there and see what we're talking about without making it seem as if we're trying to beat somebody in the head. Okay, this is something we wanted to be shown for reference purposes. Brothers and sisters, I want to read something that comes out the book that I wrote. I wrote a book entitled Deuteronomy 28, verse 15 to 68, The Condition of the Blacks. And that book is subtitled History Untold to the Masses. Okay, so what we're dealing with in this regard, I want to speak about the argument that's given to us as Israelites about there was a Roman historian by the name of Munter. And this guy, Munter, the Roman historian, spoke about Israelites that was taken by ships from the land of Israel into the land of Egypt. So let's go on in this particular regard and see what Munter says and then go on from that particular point. Because one of the things to point out, brothers and sisters, is they did not sit back and think carefully upon this particular subject. All right, let's go. The historian Munter of Rome says this. Munter, Roman historian, says the following. Now that Betar had been captured, everything came under human control, while Palestine, parentheses Judah, was reduced to a desolate mound. Captives were sold into slavery in numbers too great to count. First, they were brought to the grand annual market at the terebinth elo tree in Hebron, or in the words of Hieronymus, to the tent Ohel of Abraham near Hebron, each slave sold for the price of a horse. He goes on to say, those captives who were not sold there were brought to the marketplace in Gaza, aka Gaza, which, because of the great multitude of slaves who were sold there, was called Hadrian's marketplace. And those that were still not sold there were herded into ships and were taken to Egypt. Many died in transit, whether by starvation or by shipwreck, while many also were killed by cruel masters. Munter, Primordia, Ecclesiastical Africana, pages 85 and page 113. So this is coming from the Roman historian Munter, that they said, well, this shows that the black Hebrew Israelites don't know what they're talking about. But let's see and go over what Munter says, and then go back and remember what we're looking at when it says Babylon came to power in 606, Persia in 539, Greece in 331, all that being the BCE era, and Rome coming to power in 146 BCE. In the above cited text is used frequently against the, quote, black Hebrew Israelites. The Roman historian Munter, if he is read correctly, does not denounce the claim made by the author, which is me, but rather says the following. He says this: now that Betor had been captured, everything had come under human control, while Palestine, aka Judah, was reduced to a desolate mound. Captives were sold in slavery, too great to count. First, they were brought to the grand annual marketplace at Terebinth Elo tree in Hebron, each slave sold for a price of a horse. Those captives who were not sold there were brought to the marketplace at Gaza, which, because of the great multitude of slaves was sold there, was called Hadrian's marketplace. And those who were not still sold there were herded into ships and were taken to Egypt. Many died in transit, whether by starvation or by shipwreck, while many were also killed by cruel masters. This is the part that they're saying, brothers and sisters, must be in regards to Deuteronomy 28, verse 68. But let's see what it says. The above citation from Munter is used, as stated frequently, by those who are against the claims that are made by, as they call us, the black Hebrew Israelites. If we read it carefully, it says, first, they were brought, each slave sold for the price of a horse. Those captives who were not sold there were brought to the marketplace in Gaza. Who was sold there was called Hadrian's marketplace. Those who were not sold there in Hadrian's marketplace were herded into ships and were taken to Egypt. The quote from Munter states emphatically that the people were taken first, were brought to a place, a grand marketplace in Hebron. Then Munter goes on to say, they who were not sold there were brought to the marketplace at Gaza. Then Munter goes on to say that they who were not sold there were herded into ships and taken to Egypt. I have to ask this: what happened to the descendants of them who were first brought to the place and the descendants of them who were brought to another place? See, the part when you read about Munter in this particular aspect, brothers and sisters, he mentions the people going to Egypt as the third party. See, first they was taken to Hebron, then to Gaza, then those who were not sold in either of those places were brought to what they call Egypt by ships. So now when they're citing this, I'm asking, what happened to the descendants of the slaves that was in Gaza? What happened to the descendants of the slaves that was in Hebron? But see, when your goal is to sit there and cut off the house of Israel from existence, as it says in Psalms 83, they hold crafty converse, it's easy to sit there and just say, well, see, this right here is what it's talking about, and that's it. No, the word of the Most High is not going to come back void. He will call for the fishers and the hunters of his people, as he said in Jeremiah chapter 3. So this is something we want to point out for edification purposes. It says this: the people Munter spoke of may have had children. Slave masters want their slaves to have children so that they can have more slaves. Captors want their captives to have more children so they can have more captives. So again, what happened to the descendants of the people that Munter spoke of? What seems to happen is that people read Deuteronomy 28, verse 68, and then want to deny that the, as they say, black Hebrew Israelites teach. So they go to Munter and misunderstand history and what Munter was saying. Munter, like Josephus and other historians, were given an account on what they understood of the captivity, enslavement, and diaspora of the people of Israel and Judah. So this is something we want to point out for edification purposes. One of the other quotes that they try to sit there and make, they say comes out of the book of Josephus. So we want to sit there, brothers and sisters, all right, and take the time, if we will, and let's go into the book of Josephus and let's see what Josephus says so we can gain an understanding of what we're talking about. All right. Well, we want to go into the book of Josephus right here and read this particular part. All right. This is coming from the book of Josephus, Wars of the Jews. All right. Book 5. And here's what it says. So, pardon me, book 6, so we can gain an understanding. It says this, the book of Josephus, Wars of the Jews, book 6. And now, since his soldiers were already quite tired with killing men, and yet there appeared to be a vast multitude still remaining alive, Caesar gave orders that they should kill none, but those that were in arms, and oppose them, but should take the rest alive, but together with those whom they had orders to slay. They slew the aged and the infirm, but for those that were in their flourishing age and who might be useful to them, they drove them together into the temple and shut them up within the walls of the court of the woman, over which Caesar set one of his freedmen, as also Fronto, one of his friends, which last was to determine everyone's fate according to his merits. So this Fronto slew all those who had been seditious and robbers, and who were impeached one by another. But the young men he chose out of the tallest and most beautiful, and reserved them for the triumph. And as for the rest of the multitude that were above 17 years of age, he put them in bonds and sent them to the Egyptian mines. Titus also sent a great number into the provinces as a present to them, that they might be destroyed upon their theaters by the sword and by the wild beasts. But those that were under 17 years of age were sold for slaves. Now, during the days wherein Fronto was distinguishing these men, there perished for want of food 11,000. Some of them did not taste any food through the hatred of their guards bore to them, and others would not take in any when it was given them. The multitude also was so very great that they were in want even of corn for their sustenance. So this is something we wanted to point out, that many people try to go into the book of Josephus and then say, see, it says what? That he took them and sent them to the Egyptian mines. Brothers and sisters, the book of Josephus, Wars of the Jews, book 6, chapter 9, don't say nothing about ships. All it says, in quote, it says, but the young men he chose out the tallest and most beautiful and reserved them for the triumph. And as for the rest of the multitude that were above 17 years of age, he put them in bonds and sent them to the Egyptian mines. Titus, meaning Titus Caesar of Rome, also sent a great number into the provinces. So that's coming out of the book of Josephus, Wars of the Jews, book 6. So now, if you're citing Josephus as a way of saying that that's the prophecy being fulfilled of Deuteronomy 28, trying to then also say that Deuteronomy 28, verse 68, is only the Romans and the Israelites taking them to Egypt and Northeast Africa, your argument holds no weight, because the same author, Josephus, says that he sent them to the Egyptian mines and to the provinces of Rome, that they might be destroyed in their theaters by the sword and by the wild beasts. If you know anything about the Roman history, you would know that Titus Caesar was the one that was responsible for building the Colosseum. So now, let's remember that as we get into this particular aspect, by the sword and by the wild beasts. But those that were under 17 years of age were sold for slaves. So we don't read nothing in that part in the book of Josephus, Wars of the Jews, book 6, chapter 9, in regards to something about ships. This is something we want to point out for edification purposes, because they're going to go and try to cite Munter. They're going to go and try to cite this portion here in the book of Josephus, talking about, see it, it says Egypt, and then it says slaves, and then it says ships, but you can't cite Munter and Josephus. You know why? Because if you're citing Munter, let's go back and see what Munter said so we can gain an understanding. All right? In the Roman historian record left by Munter, let's see what it says there. It says what? In part, those captives who were not sold there were brought to the marketplace at Gaza, because of the great multitude who was sold there was called Hadrian's marketplace. That's why you can't cite Munter and Josephus, because Josephus did not speak about Hadrian. Let's go over the aspect. Correct me if I'm wrong. Let's go over the aspect. Okay, you have it to where there was Titus. He was killed. Some say by his brother Domitian in history. Then after Domitian, you had Nerva. Then you had Trajan. Then you had Hadrian. See, Munter is citing something over 60 years after the death of Titus. So if the people who were sold there as captives, where it was called Hadrian's marketplace, you can't connect that to 70 AD when Hadrian came to power in the year 117 AD. This is something we want to point out for edification purposes. See, they don't think, excuse my language, that niggas read. This is something they just try to run by, shot by, or they're not going to read anyway. Their God turn their back on them. Can they ever sit there and come to power? Hallelujah. Because we want to know and let it be known and understood that Yahulo Yashain, Yahulo Natan le Yisrael Yashena le Olam. He does not sleep, nor did he give like the spirit of sleep to his people forever. So when it says that Yah will make the people blind, it's Yah who's going to open the people's eyes. So Christian apologists who try to sit there and go against whom they call the black Hebrew Israelites, no, your argument is mute and moot. Mute and moot. All right? So we want that to be noted for edification purposes. You are speaking over 50, 60 years between the aspect of what happened with Titus and the aspect of what happened with Hadrian. So if you want to cite Munter, the Roman historian, he is citing something in regards to Hadrian. Josephus in Wars of the Jews, book 6, chapter 9, is citing something about Titus. So you can't not take both of them and say it's talking about the same thing. Let's go on. Brothers and sisters, let's go to the book of Josephus, book 6, chapter 7. Sorry. Wars of the Jews, book 7, chapter 2. Sorry about that. We are in the book of Josephus, Wars of the Jews, book 7. And it says this. Now at the same time that Titus Caesar lay at the siege of Jerusalem, did Vespasian go on board a merchant ship and sail from Alexandria to Rhodes, which he sailed away in ships with the 3 rows of oars. And as he touched at several cities that lay in his road, he was joyfully received by all of them. And so passed from Ionia to Greece, whence he set sail from Corcyra to the promontory of Ipix, whence he took his journey by land. But as for Titus, he marched from that Caesarea, which lay by the seaside, and came to that which is named Caesarea Philippi, and stayed there a considerable time. and exhibit all sorts of shows there. And here a great number of the captives were destroyed, some being thrown to wild beasts, and others in multitudes forced to kill each other as if they were enemies. So when it says destroyed by wild beasts, you go to Deuteronomy 28, verse 68, when it says, your carcasses shall be unto the fowls of the heaven and to the beasts of the earth, and there shall be no man to fray them away. That's Deuteronomy 28, verse 26. So these Christian apologists who want to say that it's only talking about Rome between verse 48 to verse 68, how do you have a prophecy of verse 26 happening and when you say could have not happened? See, because as stated, when you don't serve the God of Moshe, the God of Moses, you can't understand a prophecy that the God of Moses gave to his prophet Moshe about his people Israel. So this is something we want to point out for edification purposes. All right, let's now go into the book of Josephus, Wars of the Jews, chapter 5. And it says this, all right? Titus is noted in Josephus' Book of the Wars, chapter 5, that he went from Syria to Antioch from the Euphrates and then went back to Antioch. And in a way of going to Egypt, he went to Jerusalem in his progress. It says this in the book of Josephus. So Titus took the journey he intended into Egypt and passed over the desert very suddenly and came to Alexandria and took up a resolution to go to Rome by sea. And as he was accompanied by 2 legions, he sent each of them again to the places whence they had before came. So what is the point in this? It says basically that Titus Caesar, who died in 81 AD, mind you, he was noted as going from Antioch all the way down to Caesarea, all the way down to where Jerusalem was, and then taking people across the desert very suddenly. It says that right in Josephus. It says across the desert. See, all of this is cited in the book, Egypt Talking Writing. So these are things we want to point out for edification purposes. You have yet been able to show a record where it says Titus took the people from the land of Israel or even the land of Canaan or the land of Palestine and took them over to the land of Egypt by ships. You have not been able to show that in Munter. You have not been able to show that in the book of Josephus neither. And so reading carefully, they are citing one historian named Munter that cites something about Hadrian, and then when they jump back into the book of Josephus, that doesn't speak about Hadrian. See, this is why we want this to be noted for edification purposes. With that, say told out for the time. There will be a part 3 coming up very soon tonight. Shalom. Give me about, it's 11:09 now. Give me about to 11:30 p.m. tonight. All right? For those who are listening to this later on, some days or weeks later, just go on to the next video with the same aspect and name, part 3. All right? With that, shalom. Have a good night. For those who are able to continue to join us, please do so. We're going to take an intermission of about 20 minutes and then come back with part 3. Shalom Lakem.